honored to welcome you all to this panel discussion, which will celebrate the book launch of Professor Dr. Tahir Kamran's book, Chequered Past, Uncertain Future, The History of Pakistan. My name is Ms. Rajaa Sahgal, and I am a DPhil in history student at the University of Oxford and also the moderator for today's discussion. Before we take the conversation further, please allow me to introduce our fellow panelists. So we have with us Professor Dr. Tahir Kamran, who's the head of the Department of Liberal Arts at Beacon House National University. He has authored 8 books and edited 2 volumes, which are available both in English and Urdu. And he has also written countless research papers and articles. But if I were to start naming them, we'd probably be here the entire day. His most recent book looks at the history of Pakistan, but the broader themes he has explore the history of colonialism, colonial Punjab, sectarianism, and the role of religious minorities. His previous affiliations include being the Dean of the Arts and Social Sciences faculty at Government College University, Lahore, as well as being the chairperson of the History Department. And his most recent accomplishment we will be celebrating today. And he has also held the Allama Iqbal Professorial Fellowship at the University of Cambridge. Next, we have Professor Dr. Tariq Rahman, whose research focuses on the linguistic history of Muslims in South Asia. He has published countless books again on the subject matter, and he was also honored with the Sitara Imtiaz and the Pride of Performance Award. Lastly, we have Dr. Marcus Daechsel from Royal Holloway University of London, where he is a reader in Muslim societies in South Asia. His research interests look into the impact of development on politics, culture, and society in South Asia, and he has also published 2 books on the matter, including Islamabad and the Politics of International Development in Pakistan. So I'll just open up with some opening remarks from Professor Tariq. Okay. Okay. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Dora Gunsberger, who is the deputy head of the mission of the Embassy of Hungary since 2023. She did her PhD. She did her PhD in South Asian Studies from SOAS and her MPhil from the University of Cambridge. She will be joining us soon. She's just running a bit late. So just to give a brief layout of the format, we'll have some opening remarks from Dr. Tariq Rahman, and then I'll pose a round of questions to the panelists before opening to the audience for Q&A. So over to you, Professor Tariq Rahman.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not well, so it is possible that you do not hear me very well. Cannot hear me. Hello. Okay. Yes, this seems to be all right. Otherwise, I'm not very well. I have come because of my colleague and friend's book launch. So if you do not if you miss some remarks by me, if my voice is low, please let me know, just raise your hand. Okay, if it is all right, let me begin. Dr. Tahir Kamran's book, it is in my hand, Chequered Past, Uncertain Future, The History of Pakistan. The main, I think, for me, the main distinctive feature of this book is that it deviates from official history. What is official history? Well, K.K. Aziz has written actually 2 books on it, and one of them is called The Pakistani Historian, in which he talks about the restraints, the constraints of the Pakistani historian. The Pakistani historian, they've got to toe a line, a certain official line. I don't say they have got to toe it. I mean, it's just that they have been toeing it. And therefore, this history starts from Muhammad bin Qasim's conquest of Sindh. In other words, it ignores all the past. Now, Dr. Tahir Kamran's book begins with the dim past of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Although it has not been, the language has not been deciphered. Esco Perpola has written a whole book about the undeciphered language of Mohenjo-daro, but the certain patterns of clothes and of other kind of let's say artifacts discovered from it reveal to us that there is a lot of continuity between that time and this time, at least in the Indus Valley, and possibly also elsewhere. because the civilization spread in parts of India also. Anyway, so this is one. And this past, he has, for us, he has brought this past as past of Pakistan, the land which we now call Pakistan. Secondly, he has deviated from the normal, from the usual, from the usual way of dividing history between Muslim rule and Hindu rule and British rule, etc. In fact, as other historians have also told us, the Turks and the Afghans, etc., who came from foreign lands, everybody came from foreign lands actually, including the Aryans. So, well, they were called from their ethnic names. They were called Turkish rule, or they were called Turkosha, they were called, and then Mughal, etc. So they were not called Muslim. So it wasn't all Muslim rule. Now this deviates from the ordinary history also. Secondly, it deviates from Hindutva also, as announced, as propagated now by Mr. Modi. It deviates from that because he calls it colonialism of the same kind as the British, whereas it's not the same kind. It is true they came from abroad. It is true that the highest power in the land was with the Muslims. That part is true. But what is not true is that the British actually did not settle down in this land. Whereas, in fact, these people, the Turks, the Mughals, the Afghans, the Persians, they all settled down here, learned the local languages. Amir Khusro, for instance, he was he calls himself a bird of India, a parrot of India, Toti-e-Hind. And his mother was Indian. And so many Mughal kings, their mothers were Indian. So they settled down here, learned their languages. That part is missing from the British rule. There are two phases actually in the British rule also. One is the Orientalist phase, and the other one is the Anglicist phase. Although they refer to language, basically language policy, but they can be extended to other things also, culture and education and everything else, and the language of use. So in the Orientalist part, we see, William Dalrymple has written a good book about it called The White Mughals, that the British were poets in Urdu, poets in Persian, and they married local women. In fact, one governor of Delhi had 13 elephants, and his 13 wives used to parade on it. I think Metcalfe it was. They had boobos, that means Indian women, and they married in the aristocracy also. That sort of thing. They also, at the end of it, one day somebody in England would receive a letter on a rainy day that so and so. I've got a son over here and I've got a daughter there, and I am a Hindu or I am a Muslim, and I converted about 20 years back. And the CEO of a regiment would be a Muslim, and the 2IC would be a Hindu. So that sort of thing did happen here. But this ended this started in the 18th century, middle of the 18th century, and this ended by 1833. By 1833, the British were much more anglicized, despite the fact that actually the Anglicist policy came later. But in fact, they were anglicized much earlier. The Anglicist lobby grew to such an extent that the language was, the English language was then rationed out to people. So this is a difference between British colonialism and, of course, Mughal and other people, etc.'s rule. Okay. Yet another difference, of course, that this was a modern state. Being a modern state, they had more resources and they reached out to more people. The third thing in which he deviates significantly is on Mr. Jinnah's governance. generally, people defer to him. One also, well, of course, defers to him in many ways. He must have thought it important for some reason. I do not know why, but the system which he chose for himself was not the prime ministerial system. The prime minister had less powers, the governor general had more powers. This was against the basic, I mean, in India it was different. The prime minister had more power and the governor general had less powers. And actually, the British have written about it. So here this wasn't so. So Mr. Jinnah was ruling in the viceregal manner. And this Dr. Tahir Kamran has written also. By the way, Mr. Jinnah was once, I mean, one is not denigrating from his greatness by saying this, because he was once hailed as the king of Pakistan and he refused. He did not want to be a king, but he, for some reason, perhaps he thought that others in his party were not good enough, or whatever reason, he chose to rule in this manner. So these are the ways in which his book mainly deviates from the common history written in Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tariq, for those opening remarks, and we'll just take off the discussion from here. Definitely building up on how Professor Tahir's book is the exception from the convention. Right at the very beginning, sir, you establish a very different origins of the creation of Pakistan, different from the convention we're used to seeing in our textbooks, through a very civilizational lens, and you also emphasize a lot on the role of material culture and archaeology. So could you just outline your thought process behind that, or why you chose that specific lens to sort of contextualize the origins?
Thank you very much, Rajaa, and so many friends, in the audience. I'm really overwhelmed. The thing is that when I was just that book was in a conception stage, I was just toying with the idea that Pakistan is not a monolithic entity, politically speaking, and there should be. It should be. Few people have said that. I have tried to apply a Nehruvian vision on this text. They may be right in some sense, but I think this unity and diversity principle, it is a Muslim principle per se. Pakistan having been inhabited by so many disparate factions and so many groups, lingual groups as well as ethnic groups. So Pakistan is the culmination of the process where 3 or 4 different phases have conflated into each other, like Aryan phase or civilizational phase, and then a Turkish phase and Persian phase, and all these phases have conglomerated with each other, and hence Pakistan came into being, crystallized as a state on 14th of August 1947, and that's how I try to deviate from the hackneyed path where two-nation theory or ideology of Pakistan has been discussed quite a lot, and as an underpinning ideological stimulus that eventually culminated into the creation of Pakistan. So there are so many layers, and those layers have been interacting with each other, giving it a plural space, giving it a diversified space, and not monolithic. That is, in fact, why did I started thinking in these terms. In fact, there were 2 assertions. One was by Khalid bin Said, who in his famous book, Politics in Pakistan, he declares Pakistan as the aberration from the norm. Aberration from the norm is that, there was no other state which was created in the name of Islam or the religion per se. So, and second was Pakistan as a state insufficiently imagined. That was said by someone about whom I won't talk here because that will be blasphemous. That kept on playing on my mind. That is Pakistan inadequately imagined space or a state? So I thought, if that is the case, then Pakistan needs reimagining. So that was the stimulating point, which led me to do this book in the fashion that Tariq Rahman Sahib has said. And that it is a space for plurality. It is a space for diversified cultural imaginings, and so on and so forth.
Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Tahir. I just wanted to build up on some of the theoretical frameworks and sort of imaginings you've built up on. Um, so, so I just wanted to build up on some of the theoretical frameworks you've mentioned. Of course, with the anti-colonial movement, for instance, it drew upon a lot of intellectual traditions and institutions as well. So I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned this as like a marker of civilizational identity, what sort of intellectual institutions and frameworks were used in the lead up to independence, and what were their afterlives post-independence?
Well, this we are talking a lot with my students also at BNU that we were recreated, or we were reimagined in a way that, or reinvented by the colonial state. That this is an assertion that Tariq Rahman does not agree with. And we have been discussing a lot between ourselves that what is our identity? So this question of identity, whenever it is dealt with, so my own view is that from 1860s onwards, the subcontinent, and particularly North Indian colonial subjectivity, was created afresh. They were given a new language, new attire, new pattern of thought, and a new sensibility. Even that sensibility even percolated into your religious sensitivity also, because your morality also was recreated. Your poetry, for instance, ghazal was discouraged, nazm was encouraged, and 11 poetry symposium in Lahore, they had a great deal to do with the new genres which were given Philip over the years. So it was from after 1857, because of the colonial structures, because of the Orientalist scheme of things. There was a new man. Man means man and woman and transgender also. They were a new sort of a human being was created. So this creation is very, very important to be understood, because at times, once in Columbia University, this question was raised, and that because of the conversation of Pakistani academics, it seems that Pakistan does not have a colonial moment up till now. It was in 2013. So colonial moment, our engagement with the colonial moment is a necessity. So we need to think vis-a-vis the colonial moment and the colonial colonial policies, as well as the way colonialism reimagined and reworked our entities as a colonial subjectivity.
Thank you so much. I think Dr. Tariq wanted to respond to that. To Professor Tahir's comment. Okay. If you want, otherwise, okay. Okay. Building up on colonial institutions as well, I think one of the narratives we had was that of development being tied with the civilizing mission. So I'll turn to Dr. Marcus now, because his work focuses on this. So to what extent was development a feature of the civilizing mission? And do you sort of see this continuing in a apparent post-colonial Pakistan?
Okay, yes. Thank you, first of all, to be part of this panel. It's a great honor to be here. I really enjoyed your book, and I have to say, you've been part of my intellectual world ever since I was a PhD student. So I'm doubly honored to be here. I've tried to think about Pakistan's development history for some time, and I guess the question of continuities and discontinuities is a really a very important one. I think it's very easy to jump to continuities because a lot of anti-imperialist activists in the 1960s, but then also development critics in the 1990s, have seen international development as an extension of colonialism. They've pointed to the fact that aid can be used for imperial purposes, neo-imperialist purposes, but they've also looked at the kind of knowledge that development produces, and they've drawn parallels between colonial knowledge and how the British controlled India by essentially telling Indians how to understand their own society, how to think about their own society. In a similar way, development discourse gives us a certain way of thinking about the world, which then gets imported. I'm a bit more careful about this now. I feel that there are both continuities and discontinuities. And a really big discontinuity, I think, is the whole purpose behind colonial development. I mean, the British initiated a lot of large infrastructure projects. They, of course, tried to change the economic structure of India for a particular purpose. But I think it's wrong to see them as a civilizing or developing agency in the first instance. And I think what we've heard yesterday from Mahmoud Mamdani, who was talking about the preservation of tradition, preserving the status quo, safeguarding power holders, preventing change, was actually a really important factor in British rule as well. And I saw that in the documents directly reflected in my work. So on the one hand, the British produce, by the 1940s, when it's clear they have to leave India, they want to make some last promise of what they could do for the Indians, and they draw up a lot of development projects, some of which were then actually taken up by the Pakistani state. You mentioned some in your book, the Kanafuli multi-purpose project in East Pakistan, the Vasak Dam, and many others. But at the same time, I also still remember these documents in front of me. Right after partition, British officials stayed on in Pakistan, and they were asked about Pakistan's industrial potential. And they said, well, it would be unwise to introduce industrialization too early because it would destroy the natural order of society here. And the best you should do is fruit canning and fruit tinning industry. So actually a kind of very anti-development vision. And I think in the British mind, ultimately, you get the feeling that they ultimately hoped that the civilizing mission would never be successful. They set the bar so high that they could always remain in the position of domination, telling others what to do. And I think here things really change after 1947, because once we move to a language of development, which comes out of the United States primarily, it uses a completely different conceptual toolkit. It doesn't talk about tradition, customs, civilization, or race, but it talks about a much more sociological vision of underdevelopment, malnutrition, insufficient energy infrastructure, insufficient GDP per capita, and such indicators. And they're actually quite neutral. They're not kind of as racially charged as the British conceptual toolkit. And that's why development can work in so many different places around the world, regardless of what kind of civilizational space you are in. It's the same language for Chile in South America as it is for Pakistan over here, regardless of historical background. And the other big change, I think, so it's much less racist, I think, in some ways. And the other big thing is that people really believed, at least by the 1960s, and you really get that sense, I think, in some of the propaganda of Ayub Khan's government. You also talk about that development will happen. With colonial development, you were always waiting. It's like waiting for Godot. It happens the day after tomorrow. Progress is very, very slow, but the language of the 1960s talks about big push, takeoff. Everybody was really talking about a sense of agency that was very, very immediate. So for me, there's actually a lot of break as well in that discourse.
Yeah, thank you so much for those insights. And I think one of the key features of development, which is something your work has built up on as well, is urbanization and town planning. And this is definitely one construct which sort of left a colonial spatial trace behind in the colonies. So I just wanted to ask, in the context of Pakistan, how has like urbanization been connected with the political expansion of the state?
Okay, should I just follow up
Yeah,
directly
sure,
onto
sure.
this? Yeah, so my work has been basically a historical reconstruction of the Islamabad project. So I've worked on how first Karachi was replanned in response to the influx of refugees by the Ayub Khan government, using international aid networks, international experts, which then morphed into a second project, which was the building of a new capital city, shifting the capital from Karachi to Islamabad, and then the construction of Islamabad. But I think there's a much bigger question, and I really would like to know what Tahir Kamran Saab would say about this. I mean, what's the importance of urbanization for Pakistani history? Because one thing I notice is that the British colonial rulers were very uneasy with cities. They didn't like cities, they didn't like urban spaces, because they were quite difficult to control. They were not as easily readable as the countryside in terms of, you know, ethnic divisions, caste divisions, biradri divisions. It was much more chaotic, much more dynamic. People move into the city population changes. The city geography can be very hard to read, very hard to make sense of. So for the British, urban activism, urban mobilization was always a particular danger because it was much harder to control than rural mobilization. You couldn't use intermediaries, biradri politics, that kind of thing, to control it. So I'm wondering, I mean, what's the bigger impact of that then on Pakistani history? Because not only do you have the dislocation of millions of refugees in 1947 who move into Sindh primarily, but also into Punjab, who have to be resettled. So you have a massive growth of cities like Lahore, Karachi, but also Faisalabad and other places, which need to be controlled. And you talk about, for example, the basic democracy scheme at great length in your book, which is a very inept way of controlling urban space. It may work quite well, you know, in rural areas, but it's much more difficult to implement in rural settings. And the same problem has continued. Now Pakistan is a space where we have some of the largest cities in the world, with Karachi, you know, above 20 million, Lahore coming, you know, a close second. So urbanization has continued. And if you want to make sense of Pakistani politics now, I think so much is about fight over urban space, over living space. And also conceptually, I think it's very challenging because different cities, they're growing together along the kind of big motorways and transport hubs. You have cities that kind of grow at great distances. So the whole division between urban and rural is becoming very blurry, which also means that, you know, how we make sense of politics changes. You know, what is urban politics, what is rural politics, it blends into each other. There are people in India thinking about this conceptually. They call it frontier urbanism, when you can have, you know, a rural form of politics right in the city, in the middle of the city, because it has grown so much. So, and this is a huge challenge also in terms of environmental changes and so on. So I would really like to know from you and learn from you what you think. I mean, what has been the impact on the history of Pakistan, its political history, about which you write, you know, at great length, this process of rapid urbanization, which has started around partition time and which is now accelerating at ever greater speed?
We'll take your comments, especially because you refer a lot to the overdevelopment of the state in your book as well. Yeah.
Yes, the urbanization, urban areas are, of course, more difficult to control, that's right, and more difficult to manage. As far as the overpopulation is concerned, it makes democracy much more difficult. One reason for that is that so many people, our system is such that the party which wins the seats actually rules. Now, what happens is that the party which wins the seats, let's say there are 10 seats, and a party wins the 10 seats by just one vote each. So how many people are left out? actually people who don't want that government can be more in number than those who want the government. Just the number of people. In short, the more the people, the less the franchise, and therefore more difficult to control. Because for them, that government is actually not a legitimate government at all. So that's one aspect. The other one is, how do you manage such things? How do you have transport? How do you have medicine? How do you have food, etc., for so many people? So obviously what happens is that crime grows. One reason for so much crime in Karachi was that Karachi is overflowing. It's bursting at the seams. So that is the other thing. The third reason is, the third problem is that once this happens, security is privatized. The rich people can have guards of their own, which means that the police doesn't have that work to do. The police will therefore do other things like giving guard to people, politicians and generals and whatever. So they're used for that security, but they're not used for the security of human beings, the ordinary citizens. So security comes at a cost, or it doesn't come at all. Then there is education. That too suffers. With so many people, obviously there are going to be, government cannot teach so many people. There are going to be private schools, they will be teaching people. That means much more cost, and then government talks about public-private relationships, etc., and backs off. And actually the government's role, and the neoliberal state is like this. The neoliberal state wants the state, not to do things for people. The capitalists will do things for people. And they will, that is what is happening here. So all this privatization of education, privatization of security, privatization of housing, everything is because we have too many people. So that is another thing which happened because of overpopulation.
Whenever we are talking about urban spaces, the thing is that in European experience, the urban spaces were inhabited because of the process of productivity was unleashed there. There were industrialization, there was, because of industrialization, there was job market, and people were drawn in to come and live in the urban spaces, and there was a great shift from the rural to the urban. But in Pakistan's case, urbanization happened, but urbanization was not organic that way, because in cities there had been no process of productivity that was set in motion. So it was those places were so so congested places which were difficult to govern. That is the real problem, and particularly Karachi, obviously, but Faisalabad is yet another example where population is so much, it's overwhelming with, it's bursting at the seam. And same is the case with Rawalpindi. So these cities have become hard to manage, and obviously it has its political implications. When there is no local body system anchoring your parliamentary politics, obviously then the urban spaces are left unattended, and that is what is happening in Pakistan.
Thank you so much. So I think we're looking into the whole geospatial constructs as well, and you've mentioned a lot about structures as well. So you have like the structure of provinces in terms of like urban spaces, but also their own political party affiliations as well. And I want to move on next to what you discuss in your book as well about the whole cycle of dynastic politics. But at the same time, you've also hinted at some individual personalities and their traits, which has sort of produced a different impact from the voter bank. So I think moving on forward, I just wanted to ask, like, can we imagine dynastic politics without certain individuals, or in your opinion, would individual charisma still be a necessary prerequisite for wielding power?
No, both dynastic politics as well as charisma, with these two things happening, one cannot ask for parliamentary democracy to be functional. So dynastic politics is the biggest socio-political bane, and I don't see how it will be resolved, because even if the person who is sitting in the jail, if he does not get loyal supporters and as a secondary leadership, and his sons or his sisters have to come and hold the reins of his party, then dynastic politics will be the only option available. But so far, I'm tying my hopes with that person who is that he is the only better knower of dynastic politics, and not only he is a symbol of resistance, and so many of my near dears have unleashed their criticism on that, because my chapter on IK is quite audulatory. So one a review that appeared in the Dawn that was quite castigating, just because of that one chapter. But there are reasons for that. Not only that he does not adhere to dynastic politics, number one, and number two, obviously he has a charisma. But charisma is, I think, the big problem. It's not sort of a benefit, it's a big problem, because of dynastic politics as well as charisma, your institutional side of your politics or democracy, it is hollowed out. So that's the reason I don't subscribe to either dynastic politics. And with dynastic politics, Pakistan has no future. And same is the case with charisma.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next theme of populism first. So I'll ask Dr. Marcus initial, and then I'll follow up with you, Dr. Dora. So Marcus, I just wanted to ask about, because all of these parties have sort of utilized the narrative of populism. So do you think this is the way going forward, or what role has it broadly played within Pakistan's political history as well?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and I was wondering about that when talking to students recently at GCU, who use the term populism a lot to describe various phenomena. It's a very kind of contemporary term. We all use it all the time. I think not always very well. I think sometimes we forget about the clear definitions and lump everybody together. So Trump is populist, Modi is populist. Usually we use it to describe people we don't like. We see it as a negative political, a feature of political mobilization. But if you put that to one side, and you go back to some better definition perhaps of the term, and also remember that it could have a positive connotation, especially in Latin America, where populists were an alternative way of organizing politics, then I'm really struck. And so what is it about? So there is a charismatic leader usually there, somewhere in the picture. And second is the attempt to create a division between their people, which is us, and a corrupt elite against which we are mobilizing. So this division between them and us actually replaces a very clear ideological stance. So populism can unite many, many different political positions, many different socioeconomic interests, because it can, through symbolic action, propaganda, and so on, it can create this big split between them and us. We the people are fighting some common enemy. And when I look back over Pakistani history, I wonder whether in a way, the Muslim League movement itself was the pioneer type of that kind of mobilization. It was very much about the role of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, of course not only, but he played a very prominent role. It also tried to bypass ideological divisions by creating this very very stark division between us and them, which was then underpinned with certain symbolic gestures. And this, for me, it seems to come back again in the 1970s with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the PPP. It's called the People's Party. So we are the people, the rest is the establishment, we are against them. Again, it tries to unite very different ideological positions under a charismatic leader. And I wonder whether it's happening again now in recent years in a kind of similar way. And I also feel, maybe it's an additional thought, that these were perhaps the times when young people in Pakistan felt the most mobilized, the most optimistic, and the most part of a political process. And I wonder whether, populism is a theme that we could explore.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings me to Dr. Dora Gunsberger's research as well, because you looked at the political history of religious communities in Pakistan. So especially because now you see an increased fragmentation and polarization of communities as well, tying in with the us versus them logic of populism. So would you say this fragmentation is a response to sort of them feeling isolated or alienated from the political state institutions? And more generally, could you elaborate on how communities have sort of filled the vacuum when there is a gap between civil-military relations as well? What role have communities played in that? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. And before I answer that, or try to answer that, let me just say a big thank you for waiting for me and for saving my seat. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for inviting me to this excellent panel to introduce this amazing book. It was a fantastic read, and I can only recommend it. So thank you again. My own research has been focused on religious groups, more particularly religious minorities in Pakistan. So when I hear this term community, I immediately assume that you mean religious communities. So I'll answer your question from the perspective of religious communities. I think when it comes to state-community relations, and you're asking about fragmentation and polarization, it can be at a point certainly attributed to whatever the state does or the state does not do. But in my understanding, it's a more complex phenomenon, and it's not just a result of a top-down process. It's also has to do with grassroots level dynamics as much as it has to do with top-down policies. I mean, policies of the state and things that the state does or does not do, like I said. Certainly, if we look at Pakistan's political history, we can observe that from the perspective of religious minorities, the state has done quite a lot to alienate religious minorities. But I think we have to dig a little bit deeper and go back in history, that Dr. Kamran's book does perfectly. And first of all, observe that very dilemma that surrounds the creation of Pakistan. What does it mean to be a Pakistani citizen? And what does it mean to be a Pakistani citizen for religious minorities particularly? Because a lot of questions stem from that dilemma. And I think the fragmentation and polarization, the sense of not really making sense of being a Pakistani citizen, or not maybe communities not seeing themselves as integral part of the Pakistani nation, stem from that dilemma and unanswered questions, in my understanding. But of course, a lot has been done, like I said, during the political history of Pakistan by the state. For example, if we look at the Objectives Resolution that already determined the major role of Islam in the legal structure and then the political structure of the country, to the constitutions. So I think there's a sense of I'm not quite sure what's the best word here, but maybe distrust would be the best word to describe how religious minorities, in my observation, feel when it comes to state institutions. But at the same time, like I said, it's a lot more complex phenomenon. So it can be isolation or isolating a community can be also a self-preservation strategy from the perspective of religious minorities particularly. And also the dynamics, the intercommunal dynamics that we can observe on the grassroots level also contribute to this fragmentation and polarization of the society. So in my understanding, it's not just down to the state or state policies. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the thing is that so far as Pakistan is concerned, there are a few things that I have been saying over the years. Whenever you're reading Pakistan's history, there are 4 years in Pakistan's history that have to be read again with a lot of close reading and close attention towards that. One is after creation of Pakistan, obviously 1949, not because objective resolution was passed, but because Tehreek-e-Tahaffuz Majlis-e Nabuwat was formed in Toba Tek Singh that had a lot of influence, lot of implications on the political history of Pakistan. And second is 1974, obviously 1971 when Pakistan was ceded, but 1974 when through a parliamentary process you created a minority, and then 1979 when Islamization of Ziaul Haq, Khomeini Saab's revolution, and then obviously USSR venturing into Afghanistan, all these put together and they created a new Pakistani identity. And that Pakistani identity, religion was foregrounded, and the culture was totally jettisoned. And then 2001, that war on terror. So all these four phenomena has constituted what we as a Pakistanis stand now. You know, our sensibilities, our reaction and responses towards the West, and the way we understand ourselves. You know, so it's previously it was the colonial creation, and now it's neo-colonial creation and neo-imperial creation. So one thing that I also have mentioned Pakistan as a post-colonial state, but now I have corrected myself that Pakistan is not a post-colonial state; we're a neo-colonial state, and this has to be understood properly because we are not a free country. We are decolonized, but we are not a free country. So that bid for freedom is on, and hope someday we will be free.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tahir. Okay. Shall we ask you to read an extract from your book? No? Okay. Okay. We'll open the floor to questions from the audience. If you have a preferred panelist in mind, then you can always indicate that. Yeah. Over here.
You made it.
Well, thank you very much for a very lovely discussion. From the topic that we started with, just one question that there are two major views of the history. One is the creationist view and the other is the evolutionary view. So I would ask Professor Tahir Kamran, what in his sense of theory and history is Pakistan lies in? Is it possible to describe Pakistan as a creationist theory or evolutionary theory? And by that question, I think we'll be able to metaphorize the future of Pakistan, because this discussion is going from checkered history to the uncertain history. And that is my question, because the concept or the context of evolutionary or creationary imagination would probably define what lies in the future for Pakistan. On a secondary level, within this context, the global contemporary concept of politics is also should take into account, which is called new kid in town. So Pakistan happens to be a new kid in town. So combining all this thing, what kind of future we see for Pakistan, keeping all these contexts. And if you allow me later on, being an architect and urban designer, I would like to come back to this urbanization issue, which is very important to Pakistan. Please.
So far as I understand Pakistan, is neither evolutionary nor creationist thing. Pakistan is an aberration from the norm. Of course, no other country was created the way Pakistan was. And I really, in all earnestness, think that our leadership or the founding fathers didn't know at all what to do with this country. Then obviously it was a peripheral area, and in order to develop peripheral area, to plan this area into a nation state, that was a big ask. That's a strange thing. Yesterday in Mahmood Mamdani's session, I also inquired from him whether democracy is at all possible in Africa and Asia, because I don't think the democracy, the way we understand it, can be actualized. It can be operationalized in Afro-Asian context. And he said, well, this is a question that is ongoing, and there's no definitive answer to that. So Pakistan too, how would you define Pakistan? Pakistan is really very, very difficult to define. It's not a nation state. Whether it's a multinational state, perhaps it is. So, and then what is Pakistan's nationalism? Pakistan is a polity without any nationalism, because it had a separatist ideology, and separatist ideology might not be having any nationalism per se, as the Indian National Congress said. So it's a really an extraordinary phenomenon, this coming into being of Pakistan, which is not the usual way of the process of decolonization and attaining your own sovereignty. So our concept about sovereignty too is quite contested. What sort of sovereignty we have? So it's all mercenary sort of a politics, geopolitics that we are playing with. So I don't think any of the ideas that creation or evolution, because by 1946, Jinnah was not clear at all whether we should get Pakistan or not. So how evolution comes into play here? And same is the case with creationism. Creationism and history, how we can read them together. It's a big problem for me understanding this. So Pakistan is an anomaly. So we have to do something about it.
Thank you, Sir Tahir. So we'll take one question there and then one question there. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question for you. Sir, I think since its inception, Pakistan, we facing the daunting challenges like the political instability, fragile economy, lingering with the multiple domestic challenges, integrated history. Sir, do you think that, since 3 to 4 years, I have read multiple Pakistani authors' books, abroad authors' books regarding the Pakistan history. Sir, the politics of Nepo babies, like the hereditary politics is dominated in the South Asian politics, particularly in the Pakistan case. Sir, do you think there will be an alternative of the democracy in Pakistan towards the stability, to attain the stability? Or will we continue the democracy as we have continued the US relations in the past few decades of the first since inception, and we have paid a uncountable amount of debt relations in the after the dismantling of the USSR, in the war on terrorism, and we have faced the multiple domestic challenges in Sindh province, KPK, Balochistan, and the borderline along with Afghanistan.
Sorry, can we take both questions together in the interest of time?
Thank you, Dr. Tariq and Dr. Tahir. My question is to both of you. Keeping in view the freedom of expression in Pakistan, when you think about writing an idea or book, the fear of getting picked up by the intelligence agencies or harassment. So how do you feel about it? Do you think that our writers and intellectuals, they are free and they can write the history the way they want to? Thank you.
All right. Yes, there are fears, but I must say that Pakistan is not like North Korea or other states. So there is sometimes people do not use the freedom that is given to them. For instance, when I wrote Language and Politics in Pakistan, it deviated from even Mr. Jinnah's policy, language policy. And yet, that book, it talked of language-based provinces. And that was all right. In the same way, I mean, I've done very little, but there are other people who have done far more. And so it is not as bad as we think. It's not as good as it should be. That is certainly there. But it's not as bad as we think. There are certain sensitive issues. There are certain sensitive subjects. They have to do with the military. Although now there is a lot of criticism, but earlier that was more restricted, and of course religion and so on and so forth. But apart from that, it is not as restricted as people normally imagine.
Well, coming first to Deep's question, Deep, I beg to differ from Tariq Rahman sahab. Muhammad Hanif's book, Exploding Mangoes, when it was published in English, it had a free circulation. Many people read it. But when it was translated into Urdu, so it was banned. Our establishment or our government has problems whenever things are said in Urdu or Punjabi, for that matter. But if you say something in English, then nothing becomes difficult for you, because in 2022, when my publisher had a lunch with me in London, so he said, "Are you sure when this book gets published, you will not be in trouble?" So I said, "No, I will not be in trouble because it's in English." So. So that is the case, and so far as this dynastic politics is concerned, I think we have talked about it. So unless you introduce democracy within the political parties, things cannot evolve into the modern democratic setting the way we want it to be. Because it's a nominations, it's a very, very, you can say, underdeveloped sense of democracy in Pakistan. As we say that underdeveloped nations, so it's underdeveloped democratic notions that is in circulation here. It's not a full democracy. That's the real problem. And this had happened in India also. Congress ruled for 47 years or so. But then people had to revolt against it, and they used a very jingoistic, nationalistic slogan for that. So I think we must understand that if we don't introduce democratic norms within our political parties, things are not going to go right for us. That is what you asked. Yes, because we did not fight against colonialism. We gained our independence while colluding with the colonial masters. So, yes, that's the answer to it. That's because it's an overdeveloped state, and overdeveloped state means that we got whatever independence we claim we have got by colluding with the colonial masters. We haven't fought against colonial masters. That is the real problem. So whenever you gained your existence, or you gained your freedom while having good terms with the colonial masters, and you don't construct your alternative ideologies vis-a-vis colonial structures, things are bound to be the same. It won't go anywhere else. That will be my answer. You're not satisfied, but we can
Okay.
talk about it later.
I think I'll have to bring in my authoritative role as a moderator and thank everyone for joining us. But please join us outside if you have follow-up questions, and you can interrogate Sir Tahir more. So thank you so much again. And